What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today, we got an awesome video for you guys. Really excited to make this video because it's something that I believe in very strongly. It's a polarizing topic. I really like to get into these discussions because they're very important and people are really for or against them. People either love to draft handcuffs, won't leave a draft without one, or people are just totally against it. You'll find out what side, and if you can't tell from the title, you'll find out what side I fall on. I'm going to give you all of the reasons why I never, ever, ever, under any circumstance, draft a handcuffed. But we'll get to that. And we're going to start off, like we always do, with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day: what running back ranked last in breakaway percentage through the first 8 weeks? So the first half of last season, what running back was last in breakaway percentage? It was Mike Gillislee. Todd Bailey got that one correct. Today's stat of the day: what center, we're going to the offensive line, guys, what center was last in both pass blocking and run blocking last season? He got the lowest grade in run blocking and pass blocking. So it's pretty tough to pull that off. You got to be pretty darn bad. But what center? If no one gets it right, I'll just give it to whoever says the team correctly, I guess. But to be completely fair, there's only 32 options, really. I mean, this was a person who did actually play snaps. So you guys should probably get this right. If you have to look it up, just the players, just looking up offensive lines, you can do so. But don't look, obviously, up on Pro Football Focus. If you guys want a membership to Pro Football Focus, I'll say don't be using it for the stat of the day, because it's useless to you, because the winner of the stat of the day is going to get a membership for Pro Football Focus, so there's no incentive to cheat. But if you guys want to look up all these unique stats, we have a promo code in the description box. You can get, I think it's about 25% off, so check that out. I will say, people have asked me, if you don't play DFS and you're just playing like a season-long league, you can just get Edge. You don't need the Elite package. If you're playing DFS, I mean, I have Elite. I think it's worth it if you play DFS, but hey, if you can't afford Elite and you're just playing season long, you do not have to get Elite. Just get the Edge package. On to the video. So what we're going to first do is define a handcuff, because I think that's another thing that people have different opinions on what that means. So I'm going to define it for this video and what I think a handcuff is. So what is a handcuff? It's essentially drafting the backup to a starter. Now, the only real case where you draft handcuffs is running backs. So that's all we're going to talk about in this video, because you don't draft a handcuff quarterback unless you're in like a 3 quarterback league or something crazy. But in a normal, even 1 and 2 quarterback leagues, you don't draft backup quarterbacks. Like, you just don't do that. Tight ends, again, there's so many tight ends. You don't need to draft backup tight ends, obviously, and they're not going to produce. Wide receivers, you also don't draft backups to, because, I mean, they're not handcuffs. You draft the number 2, you draft the slot guy. It's not a handcuff. That's just a player that you draft. And it's different with running backs and wide receivers. If the stud wide receiver goes down, no one really steps up off the bench, that like no one had heard of before and is all of a sudden amazing. That just doesn't happen. So it's not worth drafting those guys. But that does happen to running backs, and that's why we draft upside late, because if a starter goes down, well, now whoever his handcuff was could dominate. Now, I say could, and we'll talk about that later into why that's not always the case, but that's what a handcuff is. It's the backup to a starting running back that if the starter goes down, now that handcuff, that backup option, fills in the starter role. So if you didn't know what a handcuff was, now you know what it is. Most commonly used for high draft capital players. You don't typically handcuff your like 10th round pick. Like that's not a handcuff. I mean, at that point, you're probably drafting like the 3rd string running back or something. It's typically used for guys in like the first 6 or 7 rounds, something like that. And obviously it's different for different players, but that's typically where it is. It's guys like Clement to Ajayi. It's guys like Carson to Penny. It's guys like Dixon to Collins. It's guys like Edmonds to David Johnson, like Rod Smith, Corey Grant, John Kelly, Latavius Murray, Jalen Samuels, guy in Steelers. So it's those types of players that if the starter goes down, they have a chance. But if the starter doesn't go down, I mean, are you starting Jalen Samuels? No. Latavius Murray? No. Kelly? No. Grant, Smith, Edmonds, Dixon, Carson, Clement? Maybe Clement a little bit, but no, you're not really starting Clement unless your team's awful. So all these guys, you're not starting. They don't have standalone value. And that's what I get into what's not a handcuff. If a player has standalone value, that you can sit there and if the starter's already there, you can start. Like it doesn't matter if the starter is injured or not. You can start this player. He's not a handcuff. That's just a pick. So it's guys like Tariq Cohen, like Tevin Coleman, Chris Thompson. Those aren't handcuffs. Those are just picks. Those guys you can just take late in a PPR league to get you points. It's not a handcuff. Good rule of thumb is if you can start them with a healthy starter, they're not a handcuff. And it's really just third down backs. So if you got a scat back out there, even Hines, I wouldn't even consider Hines a handcuff because there's no real scenario where Hines takes over. Even if Matt gets hurt, it's Wilkins. Wilkins is going to take over the early down work. So Hines isn't really a handcuff. So that's just getting over the definition of these handcuffs. Let's get into why they're bad. Overall standpoint, and then I'm going to go into kind of two little mini discussions, and then we're going to wrap it up. Why are they bad? It massively limits your team's upside. Let's say you draft David Johnson. You got the 4th overall pick, PPR league, you're taking David Johnson 4th overall. That's great. Now you say, all right, what if he gets hurt? I just lost my first round pick. I'm going to take Chase Edmonds. That's what a handcuff is, right? That massively limits your upside. If David Johnson gets hurt, that's the only scenario in which Chase Edmonds pays off. The only scenario. There's no scenario in which David Johnson and Chase Edmonds both pay off. You're not going to start them both. There's no scenario where that happens, all right? So let's say David Johnson does get hurt. Did that help your team? No, right? Your first round pick just busted. The best chance you had at taking a player that could finish 1st overall at their position, your best chance of hitting a start-worthy option, your highest upside pick, your most draft capital, now is getting you nothing. You've lost that player. And you're like, okay, but I have Chase Edmonds. Let's be real with each other for a second. Is Chase Edmonds David Johnson? No, right? There's a reason these guys are backups. Now, sometimes it happens when the starter goes down and the backup's just awesome. But most of the time, what's most likely is that they're backup for a reason, and they're not going to produce the same numbers. So not only did you not get the same return back, but you just lost your first round pick. Second thing, flexibility, and this is probably the most overlooked thing. I have Edmonds now, right? We've taken our team. We've said David Johnson's our first round pick. Edmonds we got in like the 13th or something. You know what you're not going to do early in the season is drop Edmonds. That's going to be a pick that you're emotionally attached to because you're saying, I have to handcuff David Johnson. So when this year's Alvin Kamara is sitting there in free agency waiting to be added, you can't add him because you're waiting for your starter to get hurt. That's what you're doing. You're sitting there with a bench spot saying, I'm waiting for my best player to not play for me anymore. Well, don't do that. Wait for someone else's best player to get hurt. Don't draft David Johnson and Chase Edmonds. Draft David Johnson and Rod Smith. Or draft Ezekiel Elliott and Chase Edmonds. Now you have a world where you have 2 starters. You have 2 RB1s. That's possible. It's not possible if you draft a backup. I think that's just a very, very overlooked thing, is that you're going to hold on to this player. I mean, there's no reason to draft a handcuff and then drop him by week 2. You didn't gain any. I mean, what did you gain? What are the odds that your starter goes down in week 1? It happened to David Johnson, but how often does it happen that your starter goes down in week 1 and all of a sudden you've got the backup? And guess what did happen last season? The backups weren't all that good. They weren't David Johnson. They did not return David Johnson numbers. So you're limiting your team's upside. You're limiting your team's flexibility. And it honestly assures you nothing. And it's difficult to predict. It assures you nothing. And it's difficult to predict. How many times do we think we know the backup? And then it turns out we're wrong. I mean, we're not in these front offices. We don't know exactly what their plan is when someone goes down. We don't know exactly how good these players are. We like to think we do. But this stuff's impossible to predict. So even if you draft the backup and the starter goes down and you're like, I've done it. I've done it. Well, you haven't because your starter just went down. But also, what if you missed? What if it was the other guy? Now you've missed on both picks and some other guy in your league just picked them up on free agency. There's so much that we don't think about when guys go down that we need to be. It's not the third down guy, so it's not the guy that's getting points. When the starter goes down, the third down back does not take over the first down work. It's typically someone else. And it's typically a running back by committee. Let's look back to last season. I made this video, and one of the top comments was that if you draft Frank Gore, you have to draft Marlon Mack because you're guaranteed, use that word, guaranteed a starting running back. What I said was, no, you're not. There is a negative correlation, first of all, between the picks, obviously. For Mack to have paid off last season, Gore needed to get basically 0. For Gore to pay off, well, Mack couldn't have taken over. So negative correlation there. There's no world with which they both succeed. There's no way that Gore and Mack are both going to be starting on your roster. The most likely scenario is that you can't start either. The most likely scenario last season was that Gore was going to play every game, barely return starter value on a mediocre team. So you could have started him, but your team wasn't good and you didn't win. So, I mean, you could have, but you lost. The most likely scenario is that you either lock up 1 or 2 duds, but not 0. 0% chance you lock up 0 duds. So there's no way that both of them don't bust. You've essentially locked up 1. You may have locked up 2 busts with that 1 pick. Pick one of them or neither of them. This is what I said last season. Gore ended up 26th in PPR points per game. Mack was 54th. You locked up nothing. You got a RB3, which, I mean, really, like, Gore was the quintessential, here's 8. Like, thanks. You know, his numbers might be good at the end of the season, but played all 16, so he didn't help you every week. I want the guy who plays 14 and finishes at the same spot because he's helping me more when he plays. I don't have to play him when he's hurt. But you lock up nothing when you take all the backfield. There is a scenario, and it's the more likely scenario in today's game of football, that all you're doing is taking 2 running backs that are going to cannibalize each other. That's why we target the elite studs early, the guys that we know they're getting the workload. Could they get hurt? Absolutely. It's a brutal game. It is an absolutely brutal game, and players aren't injury prone. Football is an injury prone sport. If you play football, they should all be lumped into one bucket that says, I could get hurt on any given play. They could get hurt when no one touches them. You ever seen these ACL injuries? It's not when they get tackled most of the time. It's when they're in the open field making cuts. So they could get hurt not getting tackled, and just look at how they get tackled. They can get hurt then too. So no pick is safe. You can make a perfect pick. One that should work out. If you simulate the season 1,000,000 times, that should work out most of the time. And yeah, he could bust. We're going to see busts all over the place that were good picks. It doesn't make him a bad pick. It just means that, you know, they got hurt. Variance wasn't on your side. But we lock up the best chance for these players early in the draft. When's the best chance for breakouts at the lowest draft capital position that can win you a championship? It's late. But give yourself 2 chances. Don't give yourself 1 or 0 chances. Give yourself a chance to have Zeke and Chase Edmonds on your team. And don't tie yourself to Edmonds by drafting David Johnson as well, because now you're not going to draft Chase Edmonds when you have David Johnson. Let's look at one last thing. The insurance dilemma. I talked about this in an article, I believe. I talked about it last season, but it's just this dilemma game that I made up. You and 11 other people, so that's 12 of you. You're given $1 million to make investments. The person with the most money after 5 years wins. Let's just say they get to keep their money. No one else gets anything. So there's a winner, there's 11 losers. We'll say second place gets some, because that's how leagues are set up most of the time. First place wins a lot of money, second place wins some, everyone else loses. Do you buy insurance? No, right? Why would you buy insurance in this game? That doesn't make sense. You know, you lose your assets and you get insurance, and some of them come back. Because I'm assuming that the insurance doesn't give you everything back, because that's not what happens in our game, remember? In fantasy, you don't get everything back. So you're going to pay money in the off chance that you lose your investments and get some of it back. That's a bad investment. It's a good way to get, 4th or 5th place maybe, but it's not a good way to win. And that's what I'm trying to do for you guys. I hear a lot of stories about people who make the playoffs every single year, or at least, most years. But they're always getting 4th. They're always getting 5th. They sometimes get 3rd, but they just can't win. We're trying to win here. That's how I design these mock drafts, these strategy videos. That's how I design the rankings. Go to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. The rankings are not always conventional. I take stands on these players because I want upside. I want players who have a chance to give me the championship. That's what I want. I'm not taking out an insurance policy. We play in 10 to 14 team leagues. We're given an amount of draft capital, whether that be an auction league or a snake draft, obviously with the 3rd round pick being worth more than a 5th round pick. Our objective in this game is to maximize value at the end of the season. We want to have the most valuable team at the end of the season. Does that ensure us a win? Nope. You could have the best team in the league and still lose in the first round of the playoffs. But, like I say all the time, if we simulate the season over and over and over again, I want the team that will win the most. I want the best chance to win. So what do? I don't buy insurance. I don't limit my upside. It's a high variance sport. I want the most upside possible. And drafting a handcuff limits your upside. It's a fantastic way to get 4th, 5th, 6th place. It's a great way to eke into the playoffs and then lose. I want to win. I want to help you guys win your championships. Okay, that's the end of this video. If you guys have any sort of input you want to make towards this video, leave it in the comment section below. I love talking to you guys in the comment section. Let's get discussions going in the comment section. Doesn't just need to be the stat of the day. Remember to vote on that, but doesn't need to be just the stat of the day. We can have discussions on the video. So let me know what you think about the video. If you think everything I said is just bogus, tell me why. Don't just shout. Don't just use all capitals and then call people idiots for doing things. No. Have a civilized discussion with actual ideas, actual points that you want to bring up against an argument. Love to know what you guys think. So leave your comments in the comment section below. That's the end of this one. Thanks for watching.